You don't truly appreciate what you have until it's gone. That isn't just a cliché. It's the brutal law of human psychology, one that hits harder than any heartbreak. People think they can play with consistency. They think they can take attention for granted. They think someone who's always there will never leave. But what happens when that man stops showing up? When the calls stop ringing? When the texts stop buzzing? When the presence that once filled the air suddenly disappears? The mind doesn't feel relief. It doesn't feel free. It feels a sharp emptiness, a void that it cannot explain. And the cruel truth is this: that emptiness screams louder than the comfort ever did. When you were always available, always giving, always chasing, there was no reason for her to value it. The brain has a sick way of dismissing what it sees too often. It convinces itself that what is constant will always remain constant. That is why she felt no urgency to treasure you. You were like oxygen, vital but invisible. She breathed you in without noticing, without thinking. But take oxygen away for even a few seconds, and suddenly every cell in the body panics, every nerve fires in desperation, every thought narrows to a single focus: survival. That's what happens when you pull yourself out of her life. You stop being background noise and you become the one thing her mind cannot ignore. This is the cruel paradox that psychology never hides. Scarcity creates desire. The human mind craves what it cannot have, obsesses over what it cannot reach, and magnifies the importance of what has suddenly vanished. You see, when you were always there, she didn't miss you because her brain had no reason to. There was no scarcity, there was no chance of loss. And without loss, there is no value. Only when you step back does the real value of your presence explode in her awareness. The silence becomes deafening. The absence becomes unbearable. The man she dismissed in confidence becomes the man she replays in her memory over and over again, trying to fill the void. It doesn't start with love or regret, it starts with confusion. She notices the change, she feels the stillness. She asks herself why the energy feels different, why the constant validation is gone, why the attention that once stroked her ego no longer flows. Psychology has a way of turning what was taken for granted into an obsession. The more she realizes she no longer controls your time, your focus, your energy, the more her mind starts to crave it. The brain equates loss with danger, and in that danger it inflates the value of what's missing. You aren't just absent, you are suddenly essential. And here's the hardest truth to swallow: the mind doesn't long for you because you were flawless, because everything was perfect, or because she suddenly recognizes your worth out of fairness. No, the mind longs for what it feels slipping away. It doesn't crave perfection, it craves possession. It doesn't crave comfort, it craves control. And the moment you stop being controllable, the moment you step out of her orbit, you trigger something far more powerful than affection. You trigger desire born from loss. The cruelest part is that this isn't a choice. It's not about her deciding she wants to miss you. It's not about her morals or her intentions. It's about psychology. The subconscious runs the show. The chemicals in the brain, the wiring of human behavior, the patterns of reward and denial. These forces are stronger than pride. That's why she can try to pretend she doesn't care. She can try to act like it doesn't matter, but late at night, when silence fills the room, her thoughts wander. They wander back to what she had, to what she dismissed, to what she assumed would always be there. And the weight of that loss eats at her, whether she admits it or not. The simple fact is this: appreciation is born from absence, not presence. A woman who thought she could treat a man like an afterthought finds herself haunted by the space he leaves behind. And the very same mind that convinced her she could do better, that she could live without him, turns against her. It replays the memories. It reopens the emotions. It reminds her of the moments she overlooked. She begins to miss not because he was always there, but because he no longer is. That is the psychology of regret, the psychology of longing, the psychology of missing someone only after they are gone. So the truth is clear. If you were ever taken for granted, if you were ever dismissed despite giving your all, you don't need to force her to realize anything. Time and absence will handle it for you. The brain is wired that way. What is ignored in presence becomes magnified in absence. What is dismissed in comfort becomes treasured in loss. And what was once taken for granted becomes the very thing that cannot be forgotten. Women don't start missing you when you give them everything. They start missing you when you stop, when you stop handing over your energy like it's free, when you stop making yourself endlessly available, when your time is no longer guaranteed, when your presence no longer feels automatic, that's when the shift begins. The mind doesn't attach value to what flows without resistance. It attaches value to what feels scarce, to what requires effort, to what feels like it could vanish at any second. That is the silent trigger most men never understand. As long as you are giving without boundaries, she doesn't have to think twice. Your attention is predictable, your validation is certain, your presence is easy to come by, and psychology reveals this cruel truth. The brain is designed to get bored with predictability. It is designed to undervalue what it does not fear losing. That is why your efforts, no matter how pure, no matter how consistent, begin to lose their weight in her eyes. She doesn't notice what you're giving because her brain has stopped labeling it as valuable. It has become normal, and normal is invisible. But the second you stop pouring, the second the stream of your energy slows down, her world doesn't feel the same. It feels lighter in the wrong way, quieter in the wrong way, emptier in a way she cannot ignore. The silence speaks louder than your words ever did. The absence screams louder than your presence ever could. Suddenly, the thing she dismissed as unremarkable becomes the very thing her mind fixates on. That is scarcity at work. And scarcity, in psychology, is one of the most powerful motivators for human desire. The law of scarcity says that people only start valuing what they believe is slipping away. It's why people chase after objects once they are discontinued, why they want opportunities once the window closes, why they cling harder to relationships once they're ending. The brain magnifies the worth of what feels rare, and the moment your attention stops being automatic, it transforms into something rare. That's when her psychology betrays her. That's when she starts asking questions she never cared to ask before. Why isn't he texting? Why isn't he calling? Why doesn't he seem affected? Why does it feel like I'm the one chasing? The truth is brutal. She only starts missing you once she feels the loss of control. When she can no longer predict you, when she no longer has the guarantee of your presence, she feels a discomfort she cannot shake off. The brain hates uncertainty. It despises unpredictability. And when the source of attention, validation, and comfort suddenly becomes uncertain, the brain begins to obsess. She doesn't just notice your absence, she amplifies it. She fills in the gaps with assumptions. She rewinds memories. She replays old interactions in her mind, trying to make sense of how she lost grip on what once seemed so solid. What most men fail to realize is this: giving endlessly does not create attachment, it creates indifference. What creates attachment is distance. What creates attachment is restraint. What creates attachment is the possibility of loss. When you stop being endlessly available, you trigger her mind to calculate your worth differently. You shift from being ordinary to being extraordinary, not because you changed, but because she finally sees you through the lens of scarcity. This is where psychology is cruel and unforgiving. She doesn't start to miss you because she woke up with a moral realization about how good you were. She starts to miss you because her brain cannot tolerate the silence you left behind. She starts to miss you because her nervous system is wired to crave what it no longer possesses. She starts to miss you because the same comfort she once took for granted now feels like a luxury she cannot access. And here is where the trap lies. The moment she begins to notice, she will send signals. She will test. She will try to pull you back into her orbit, not out of pure love, but out of her discomfort with the void you've created. And if you fall for it too quickly, if you rush to fill that void again, you destroy the entire psychological shift. She won't miss you anymore. She'll feel reassured again, and the value of your presence will crash back down to zero. That's why restraint is everything. That's why silence is power. That's why pulling back is the only way she truly learns what it means to miss you. In the end, missing is not about love, not about loyalty, not about recognition of your worth. Missing is about absence. Missing is about scarcity. Missing is about what the brain cannot reach anymore. And the hard truth is this: she only starts missing the man she took for granted when he finally stops being the man she thought would never leave. That's the law she cannot escape. No matter how much pride she carries, no matter how much she denies it, no matter how late she realizes it. The absence will break her illusions. The silence will speak the truth she didn't want to hear. And the space you leave behind will become the loudest reminder of the value she never saw when you were there. Here's the harsh truth. The more you make yourself a servant of her attention, the less she values you. That's not because she's heartless or cruel. It's because the human mind is wired to undervalue what feels too easy. The truth is brutal. What costs nothing is treated like it's worth nothing. The harder something is to reach, the higher the brain ranks its importance. This is the game psychology plays, and whether you like it or not, it dictates how people treat you. When you are always the one chasing, always the one calling, always the one checking in, you rob yourself of respect. You think consistency will win her over. You think sacrifice will make her see your worth. You think unconditional giving will force her to appreciate you. But it doesn't. It creates the opposite effect. Instead of seeing devotion, she sees desperation. Instead of admiring your loyalty, she assumes your time has no value. Instead of being drawn closer, she feels the freedom to pull away because she knows you will always cover the distance no matter how far she drifts. Psychology is ruthless in this. People do not crave what they already own. They crave what they fear losing. They crave what they cannot control. That is why she doesn't feel desire when you are constantly around her, showering her with attention, trying to prove yourself. She feels safe, yes, but safety doesn't trigger longing. Safety doesn't ignite passion. Safety doesn't make her stay up at night replaying your face in her mind. What makes her miss you is the possibility of loss, the risk of absence, the awareness that she cannot have you whenever she wants. And here lies the painful reality most men never face. By giving everything too soon, you strip yourself of mystery. You strip yourself of challenge. You strip yourself of the one element that keeps the human mind engaged: uncertainty. Without uncertainty, there is no tension. Without tension, there is no craving. Without craving, there is no missing. She cannot miss you when she never feels your absence. She cannot value you when she never fears losing you. She cannot long for you when you are always right there, waiting, ready, eager to serve. Think about it this way. If something is placed in your hands every single day without effort, without cost, without challenge, you stop noticing it. It fades into the background. It becomes normal. But take it away suddenly and without warning, and the same thing that was invisible yesterday becomes the only thing you want today. That's exactly how the mind works with people. When you smother her with attention, you become invisible. When you step back, you become unforgettable. The truth is simple yet brutal. People are wired to want what resists them, not what submits to them. And when you make yourself too accessible, too predictable, too eager, you kill resistance. You turn yourself into the easiest option. And easy options are never respected. They are used. They are taken for granted. They are left behind without hesitation. But the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop handing over your energy without thought, the moment you set boundaries around your time and your presence, the game changes. You no longer look like a servant. You no longer look like a man desperate for approval. You look like someone who knows his value. And that shift is what sparks her mind to wake up. It forces her to reevaluate what she once dismissed. It forces her to realize she can no longer predict your every move. It forces her to see you not as something she owns, but as something she could lose. And loss is the ultimate teacher. It is only through loss that appreciation is born. It is only through distance that desire grows. It is only through scarcity that value shines. This is why the more you chase, the less she cares, and the more you pull back, the more she starts to wonder, to think, to miss. Her psychology cannot escape this law. She doesn't miss you when you drown her in attention. She misses you when the flood dries up and she is left thirsty for the same presence she once ignored. So the reality is this: if you make yourself a servant of her attention, you will never be the man she longs for. You will be the man she uses until she gets bored. You will be the man she overlooks until you finally walk away. And only then, when the silence replaces the noise, when the absence replaces the comfort, when the scarcity replaces the excess, will she finally feel the weight of what she lost. She won't miss you because you were perfect. She will miss you because you stopped being hers on demand. That is the psychology she cannot escape, no matter how strong her pride, no matter how long she waits to admit it. The first sign she starts missing you is silence. Silence is louder than words, sharper than arguments, heavier than confessions. It is in silence that the human mind begins to panic, to overthink, to replay what once felt ordinary. When the calls stop, when the texts no longer come, when your attention doesn't flood her world the way it used to, the absence becomes impossible to ignore. The stillness is not peaceful, it is unsettling. What once felt normal now feels foreign. and that shift creates an itch she cannot scratch. At first, she will pretend it doesn't bother her. She will act as if she enjoys the quiet, as if your absence makes no difference. But psychology is working against her. The brain is wired to notice contrast, to obsess over change, to question what suddenly feels different. Your silence creates a contrast so sharp that it slices through her defenses. She may not show it outwardly, but internally she begins to search for answers. Why isn't he reaching out? Why isn't he checking in? Why does it feel like the air is different without him? This is not about romance. It is about biology. The human brain equates loss with threat. When something constant disappears, the subconscious sends alarm signals. It tells her something is wrong. It makes her uneasy. It makes her restless. She doesn't crave you because she suddenly became more loving. She craves you because her mind associates your absence with instability. Stability is addictive, and when it collapses, the craving intensifies. The silence doesn't just highlight your absence, it magnifies your importance. Every moment of quiet becomes a reminder. She notices the empty spaces where your voice used to be. She notices the gaps in her day where your presence once fit. She notices the void she swore she would never feel. And slowly that silence begins to gnaw at her. She fills it with questions, with assumptions, with mental replays of old conversations. She starts remembering the little things, not because they were extraordinary, but because her mind clings to them in the absence of anything new. That's how silence works. It forces the brain to recycle memories to fill the void of the present. The silence doesn't just make her remember you, it makes her miss how she felt when you were around. The security, the validation, the comfort of being seen. These feelings don't vanish just because she took them for granted. They resurface when she realizes they're no longer guaranteed. And that realization is heavy. It is not soft. It is not romantic. It is uncomfortable. It is agitating. It is relentless. She will fight it, but her brain won't let it go. That's why silence is a weapon. Not because it punishes her, but because it activates a part of her psychology she cannot control. Silence forces reflection. It forces awareness. It forces her to sit with the truth she tried to ignore. That your presence had weight, that your attention had power, that your consistency wasn't as replaceable as she once believed. The absence makes her see what the presence blinded her to. And here's the part most people don't realize. Silence is louder than chasing. Words can be ignored. Messages can be brushed off. Calls can be silenced. But silence itself cannot be escaped. It lingers. It follows her. It echoes. Every time she looks at her phone and doesn't see your name, every time she scrolls through her day without your presence, she feels it. It becomes a constant reminder that something is missing. And the more she feels it, the more her mind amplifies the loss. In that silence, she begins to crave what she dismissed. She starts to value what she once overlooked. She starts to miss the man she thought she would never need to miss. And this doesn't happen because you begged, because you explained, because you convinced her of your worth. It happens because silence itself does the convincing. It speaks louder than you ever could. Silence creates the stage for longing. It is in the quiet that regret grows roots. It is in the absence that value is restored. And it is in the stillness that the man she once took for granted becomes the man she cannot stop thinking about. Not because you reminded her, not because you fought for her attention, but because you did the one thing she never expected. You stopped giving it. Here's the second brutal truth. She doesn't actually miss you. She misses how you made her feel. The human mind is selfish like that. It craves emotions more than people. It attaches to the way someone makes it feel, rather than the person themselves. And when you were giving her your attention, your energy, your loyalty, you weren't just offering yourself. You were offering her a mirror that reflected her own worth. She felt validated. She felt safe. She felt chosen. She felt like she mattered. Those feelings are addictive, and when they disappear, the withdrawal is brutal. At first, she won't even admit it. She'll think she's fine without you. She'll distract herself, convince herself that you didn't matter that much, pretend that her world is better without the weight of your presence. But psychology is relentless. The brain remembers patterns, it remembers rewards, and every time she got a message from you, every time you showed up for her, every time you gave her attention, her brain recorded that as a reward. That's dopamine at work, and when dopamine stops flowing, the brain begins to crave it. She doesn't miss you because you were perfect. She misses the chemical hit her mind got every time you reminded her she was valuable. This is why silence burns so deeply, because in silence the validation dies. There is no longer a steady stream of comfort. There is no one reminding her she's special. There is no one feeding her sense of importance. That absence creates a vacuum, and vacuums demand to be filled. She can try to fill it with other people, with distractions, with surface-level validation, but it won't hit the same. Why? Because the brain craves specific sources of comfort. And for her, that source was you. That is why she replays memories. That is why she scrolls through old conversations. That is why she thinks of moments she once overlooked. She's not reminiscing about you as a person. She's trying to recapture the way you made her feel. It's a hard pill to swallow. But psychology doesn't lie. People miss experiences more than they miss people. She doesn't miss the fact that you exist. She misses how your existence lit up her ego, how your presence calmed her insecurity, how your attention fed her need for significance. And this is where regret starts to creep in. She realizes that no matter how much she downplayed your worth, you were the source of feelings she cannot manufacture on her own. You were the one who gave her the kind of certainty she can't replicate. And that absence makes her restless. Here's where it gets even harsher. She might try to replace you. She might run towards someone else, hoping they'll give her the same comfort. But psychology has a cruel way of exposing replacements. They never hit the same. They don't laugh the way you did. They don't show up the way you did. They don't trigger the same emotions you triggered. And this creates a brutal comparison in her mind, one she cannot escape. Instead of erasing you, she magnifies you. Because no matter what, the way you made her feel was unique. And the uniqueness of that feeling turns into longing. This longing doesn't always come wrapped in love. It comes wrapped in confusion, in frustration, in late-night questions that keep her awake. She wonders why she cared so little when she had everything. She wonders why she dismissed the very presence that now feels irreplaceable. She wonders why the same attention she once brushed off is the very attention she now craves. These questions sting, but they are necessary. They are the result of her mind finally recognizing that the validation she once assumed was endless has now run out. And here is the irony: the feelings she misses are the very ones she destroyed. The comfort she now desires is the comfort she sabotaged. The certainty she longs for is the certainty she refused to value. And that is the cycle psychology forces on anyone who takes someone for granted. You don't appreciate the feelings someone brings until you feel the pain of losing them. You don't miss the person. You miss the version of yourself that only existed when they were around. So the truth is clear. When she starts missing you, it's not because she suddenly became self-aware. It's not because she finally grew a conscience. It's because her brain cannot handle the absence of the emotions you once gave her freely. She doesn't miss you because you were convenient. She misses you because she now realizes the way you made her feel was rare, and rarity is the one thing the mind cannot stop chasing once it's gone. That is the real power of absence, the real sting of regret, and the real reason the man she once dismissed becomes the man she cannot get out of her head. She will replay memories in her mind, not because they were flawless, but because the human brain clings to patterns it has lost. Memory isn't a photograph, it's a survival tool. The mind replays what it believes is important for security, what once brought comfort, what once provided emotional stability. When you were around, she didn't notice these small moments because they felt endless, like they would always be there. But when the consistency breaks, when your presence vanishes, the brain digs through the archives. It replays the laughter she once dismissed, the conversations she barely valued, the way you showed up when no one else did. These flashes aren't chosen, they're automatic. They loop in her head because the subconscious is reminding her of what is gone. What makes this worse is that the brain does not replay memories exactly as they were. It distorts them, it exaggerates the good, it minimizes the flaws, it amplifies the emotions attached. So even if she took those moments for granted before, now they glow brighter in her mind. They seem warmer, more important, more irreplaceable than they actually were. That distortion is what makes her miss you harder. She doesn't just remember you as you were, she remembers you as better than you were, because that is how longing rewires memory. And here's the thing most people never realize. Missing someone has very little to do with logic. It's not about a rational checklist of qualities. It's not about sitting down and admitting your worth on paper. It's about the involuntary flashbacks her mind keeps feeding her. A song comes on and she thinks of you. She passes a place you once mentioned and the memory resurfaces. She scrolls through her phone and stumbles on a picture, and suddenly the emotions rush back like a storm she cannot control. This is not choice, it's programming. It's the brain reinforcing attachment by making sure the absence is impossible to forget. That is why regret feels so heavy. It isn't just the realization of losing someone, it's the constant ambush of memories. It's the inability to escape reminders. It's the way the mind turns ordinary moments into anchors that pull her back toward you. And the more she tries to move forward, the more these anchors drag her into the past. That is how missing works. It's not one big wave, it's a series of small, sharp jolts that keep hitting over and over. The more time passes, the more she starts to connect dots she once ignored. She remembers the way you laughed when she was stressed. She remembers how you asked about things no one else cared about. She remembers how you supported her without expecting anything in return. And these aren't just memories, they become reminders of what no one else has given her since. Psychology is cruel in this way. The absence of a pattern doesn't just create emptiness, it creates a comparison. And comparison is what makes her realize that what you offered was unique. But here's the paradox. She might not even admit this out loud. Pride will fight it. Ego will resist it. She may even try to bury those memories. But the harder she tries to bury them, the more they resurface, because suppression strengthens the very thing it tries to kill. The human mind works like that. When you try not to think about something, you think about it more. And so the memories multiply. They stalk her. They haunt her. They whisper at the worst times. She misses you not because she chooses to, but because her brain refuses to let her forget. What makes this more brutal is that these memories aren't neutral. They carry emotion. The laughter reminds her of joy. The silence reminds her of peace. The presence reminds her of safety. And when those emotions are gone, the memories don't just replay, they sting. They serve as a mirror, showing her what she once had and what she failed to value. And no distraction can erase that sting. No replacement can mute that echo. The mind will keep recycling the images until the truth finally sinks in. She lost something she thought she could never lose. That's why memory is the sharpest weapon psychology uses, because it doesn't fade on command. It doesn't obey pride. It doesn't wait for permission. It resurfaces at will, whether she wants it or not. And when it resurfaces, it brings back not just images of you, but the emotions tied to you. That is why she finds herself thinking about you at random, why her chest feels heavy when a reminder slips through, why she keeps circling back even when she swore she was done. The memories won't let her go, so the cycle is unavoidable. She didn't value the moments when they happened, but now those same moments won't stop haunting her. And that is the cruel beauty of absence. It turns the ordinary into extraordinary. It turns what was ignored into what cannot be forgotten. It turns the man she overlooked into the memory she cannot escape. But here's where most men destroy themselves. They break the silence too soon. They cannot handle the discomfort of distance. They see the first signs of her missing them, and they rush back in, eager to reclaim the comfort they once gave away so freely. They don't realize that this single act kills the entire psychology of longing. If she never feels the full weight of your absence, she never experiences the full force of missing you. And without that, regret cannot grow. The hardest lesson to learn is restraint. The instinct to rush back is strong because you still feel the pull. You see her reaction, you hear the subtle hints, and you think the work is done. But the work has only just begun. Missing isn't born in a single moment. It's built through sustained silence, through unanswered questions, through the tension of uncertainty. If you rush back the second she stumbles, you relieve that tension. You give her the comfort she craves before she's paid the full price of neglecting you. And once again, she learns she doesn't have to value you, because you will always return at the first sign of weakness. Psychology is clear about this. People only shift their behavior when discomfort is strong enough to force change. A mild sting isn't enough. A small absence won't do it. She has to feel the absence, like a wound that doesn't heal, like an ache that lingers no matter how she tries to distract herself. She has to feel it long enough that her mind begins to equate you with rarity, with value, with something she cannot afford to lose again. If you rush in too soon, you erase that process. You soothe her pain before it reshapes her perception. You give her relief, but you rob yourself of respect. This is why silence is not a tool, it's a test. It tests your patience. It tests your discipline. It tests whether you truly understand your worth or whether you're still addicted to chasing her approval. The silence isn't just for her to feel. It's for you to learn. It's for you to prove to yourself that you can live without her constant validation, that you don't need to run back every time she offers crumbs of attention, that you value your presence enough to withhold it until it's deserved. And here's the brutal truth. When you rush back, you don't restart the relationship. You reset the cycle. She gets her comfort, she feels her control, and once again, she takes you for granted. The lesson isn't learned. The value isn't established. The respect isn't earned. She slips back into her old mindset, believing you are still hers whenever she wants, without effort, without cost. And then the missing stops. The craving dies. The longing fades. Because she knows she never truly lost you in the first place. But when you hold the silence, when you resist the urge to fill the void, when you stay disciplined long enough, something shifts. The longing intensifies. The regret deepens. The fear of losing you becomes real, not imagined. She doesn't just notice your absence. She feels it like a shadow that won't lift. She begins to question not just why you're silent, but what it means. Did you move on? Did you replace her? Did she lose the very thing she thought she could keep forever? These questions burn far deeper than any words you could say, and this is where power lies. In silence, in restraint, in allowing psychology to do its work without interruption. Because the truth is, you don't have to convince her of your value. You don't have to prove your worth with desperate actions. Her own mind will do the convincing for you. Her own thoughts will do the chasing. Her own emotions will remind her of everything she once dismissed, but only if you give her enough time to feel the full weight of losing you. This is why patience is everything. This is why you cannot break the silence too soon. The hunger must build, the absence must linger, the pain must deepen, because only in that depth does she realize the truth. Your presence was not ordinary, it was not replaceable. It was not something she can take lightly again, and once that realization strikes, it stays. But it only arrives if you stay disciplined enough to let her suffer through the silence until her own psychology teaches her the lesson you never could. So the choice is simple. Break the silence too soon, and you kill the longing before it grows. Hold the silence long enough, and you become unforgettable. It all depends on whether you can resist the temptation of rushing back into her arms before she has truly earned the right to feel you again. The most dangerous mistake you can make is believing that missing you will automatically make her respect you. That's not how human behavior works. Missing is an emotion, respect is a decision, and decisions are only made when the emotion cuts deep enough to force change. She can miss you every single night and still treat you the same if she ever gets you back. She can ache for your presence, cry for your absence, and still slip back into entitlement the moment you return too soon. Because missing without consequence is just nostalgia. It doesn't transform anything. What creates transformation is the realization that you are no longer guaranteed, that the man she thought would always be there has become scarce, that the comfort she believed was permanent has turned into rarity. Human psychology values what is rare and ignores what is abundant. When you were always available, always answering, always showing up, no matter how little she gave back, you were abundance. You were water from a tap, useful, constant, expected, and like anything expected, you were taken for granted. But the second you shut off the tap, the second she feels the dryness, scarcity kicks in. That scarcity makes her mind rewire the way it perceives you. Now you are no longer ordinary. You are precious. You are valuable. You are worth chasing. This is the stage where missing turns into fear. Fear of replacement. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of truly losing you. At first, she thought your absence was temporary, that you'd come back like you always did. But as the silence lingers, doubt creeps in. She wonders if someone else now has your attention. She wonders if you've built a life without her in it. She wonders if the power she once held over you has vanished. And nothing terrifies the human ego more than losing control over someone who once gave it freely. Here's the brutal truth. Most men never allow a woman to reach this stage. They break too soon, they beg too early. They hand back the power before the lesson has burned itself into her mind. And because of that, she never fears losing them. She never respects the cost of neglecting them. She never feels the scar of regret deep enough to shift her behavior. But if you hold the line long enough, if you allow the missing to evolve into fear, then the power dynamic reverses. She no longer wonders if you'll come back. She wonders if she will ever get another chance. And that thought will replay in her head far louder than any words you could ever speak. The irony is that the very things she dismissed about you are the things she now obsesses over. The consistency she once ignored is now the very stability she craves. The loyalty she brushed aside is now the trait she searches for and fails to find in anyone else. The presence she treated as ordinary now feels like a luxury she may never experience again. That is how psychology works. It doesn't reveal value until the value is gone. It doesn't highlight uniqueness until comparison makes it obvious. It doesn't create longing until scarcity turns memory into obsession. But here's the catch: you must not chase the validation of her missing you. The moment you go back just to hear her admit it, you kill the effect. Because it was never about her words. It was about her internal shift. Missing must break her pride, not feed yours. Regret must change her behavior, not just soothe your ego. Otherwise, you gain nothing. Otherwise, she learns nothing. Otherwise, the cycle repeats, and you go back to being the man she thought would never leave. This is why silence isn't just about absence. It's about teaching her what abundance blinded her to. It's about forcing her to see what she couldn't see when she had you. It's about letting her own psychology torture her with the truth you could never convince her of with words. That you mattered, that you were valuable, that you should never have been taken for granted. That realization doesn't come from lectures. It doesn't come from arguments. It comes from emptiness, from nights staring at the ceiling, from days realizing no one else shows up the way you did, from the cold fact that you were never as replaceable as she believed. And once that realization takes root, it never leaves. She may move on, she may distract herself, she may even pretend otherwise, but the mind does not unlearn scarcity. It does not forget what it feels like to lose something irreplaceable. And that is the truth that will haunt her every time she thinks of you. Not just that you were missed, but that she lost you because she failed to see your worth when it mattered most. The breaking point always comes when she realizes the silence isn't just a pause. It's permanent if she doesn't act. At first, she waits, confident you'll come back like you always have. Then she tests with small gestures, subtle hints, indirect signals. When those fail, panic begins to set in. Psychology has proven that people fear uncertainty more than pain. And your silence is the greatest uncertainty she's ever faced. She doesn't know where you stand. She doesn't know if you've moved on. She doesn't know if she's been erased from your world entirely. That lack of knowing eats at her more than any harsh words ever could. Her mind begins to spiral. Every unanswered question multiplies. Every day without a response adds weight. She wonders if someone else has replaced her. She wonders if the door she thought was always open has finally been closed for good. And that's when the truth hits with brutal clarity. She no longer has the grip she thought she had on you. That realization isn't just painful, it's devastating. Because for the first time, she feels powerless. For the first time, she is the one chasing clarity while you remain silent. This is the exact reversal of the dynamic that existed before. When you were available at all times, she held the control. She could choose when to engage, when to withdraw, when to offer attention, when to withhold it. But silence robs her of that power. She can't control the narrative anymore. She can't predict your next move. She can't dictate the outcome. And that shift forces her to confront the reality that she took too much for granted. The harshest truth is this. People rarely value what is within reach. They value what they fear losing. They value what they cannot easily access. And in your absence, you have become exactly that, scarce, unpredictable, elusive. Her mind attaches more weight to you now than it ever did when you were near. And every reminder of your absence adds to that weight until it becomes unbearable. But here's where most men fail. They think this is the moment to accept her back with open arms. They crave the validation too much. They want to hear the apology. They want to feel the chase. They want to know they were missed. But if you rush in here, you undo everything. Because the moment she sees you return with no cost, no standard, no boundary, she knows the silence was just a game. She knows you were always waiting. And the power shifts right back into her hands. The missing ends, the regret dissolves, and the cycle repeats. The truth is, missing must be paired with consequence. Regret must be tied to action. Otherwise it's empty. Otherwise it's just a temporary ache that fades once you're back in her arms. Psychology makes this clear. Without consequence, the brain never rewires. Without cost, the lesson never sticks. If you allow her back into your world without any change, you erase the impact of her regret. You train her to believe that no matter how she treats you, you'll always come back, and that belief will destroy the respect you fought to gain. This is where discipline separates men who are remembered from men who are forgotten. It's not enough to make her miss you. You have to hold her accountable. You have to let her feel the weight of losing access to you. You have to prove through your actions that your presence is not free, that your loyalty is not guaranteed, that your time is not something to be wasted again. Without this, her regret is temporary. With it, her regret becomes permanent. And here's the most shocking truth. Sometimes the ultimate power is not taking her back at all, because nothing haunts the human mind more than the door that never reopens. Nothing creates deeper regret than realizing the bridge has been burned for good. Nothing makes someone miss you more than knowing they can't have you again, no matter how much they want to. That level of finality etches itself into memory forever. It turns missing into obsession. It turns regret into a scar that never fades. The silence was the beginning, the fear was the middle. But the ending, the part that changes everything, is whether you have the discipline to enforce the consequence, whether you teach her that taking you for granted cost her more than she ever expected, whether you walk away for good or return only on your own terms. That choice decides whether she truly respects you or whether she continues to cycle through the same patterns. And make no mistake, this is where most men break. They crave comfort more than power. They crave validation more than respect. They give in and they erase everything they built. But the man who resists, the man who understands his value, the man who holds the line, that man becomes unforgettable. That man doesn't just make her miss him, he makes her regret losing him until the end of her days.